Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to Dr. Judy, WTF. And I sure hope we have the volume situation solved now. We've tried everything and we tried a different little thing here, so hopefully it'll work. And please, audience, give me feedback if you're having trouble hearing. We want to know. Now, I cannot see the chat room, so I'm going to rely on my wonderful tech support to let me know what's happening and if there are any questions. So tonight we're going to be talking about healing the inner critic and lack of self-esteem, something that every one of my patients are dealing with on some level. So as you know, I'm going to be doing some mind mapping tonight as usual, and we're going to be mapping how this inner critic gets into your head and why it stays there and why it keeps going on and on like a broken record, which I call the WTF, the what the Freud. So if there are any questions or call-ins, you know that this is a call-in show, everyone. So please call in, and I welcome you to tell me what the Freud is going on in your life so we can mind map it, dissect it, and come up with a pathway to healing the inner critic voice. So, as many of you know, I am Dr. Judy Rosenberg. I am the head of the Psychological Healing Center and the creator of the Mind Map system for healing human disconnect. And this mind map system has been a system of healing that I've been using for the last, oh my goodness, probably close to a decade now, with fantastic results, much different than traditional psychotherapy, mainly because it is a system as opposed to just talk therapy, which many of you know I'm not a real fan of. So, also, in case you don't have yet a copy of my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect, please feel free to download that. It is free. You can request it by going to my website and putting in your email so that we can send it to you along with other links. And then you'll have a lot more information and you'll have the foundation of the system of healing that I created. So let's put that mind map up there so people can see what I mean by a pathway. And if you look at this mind map, it is visual. And if you're listening to it, grab a copy of it on my website so that you can see the visual. It's important because a picture, after all, is worth 1,000 words. So if you see these three rows, you can look at it through the lens of the first three as representing the past, the middle as representing the chaos, defenses, and breakdowns of today. That is the what the Freud repeat area. And then the paradigm shift out of all of this mess into healing. So look at it as the encodings of the past. And notice that I use a lot of reference to biology. You can see the DNA as a metaphor for the encodings of the past, which are the inner critical voices that we're going to refer to today. And then the next section is the decoding of the past and the crazy of the here and now. And the last section as the paradigm shift out. So in order to paradigm shift, we have to take out the psychological poison, if you will, and reprocess these ugly feelings and dismantle a lot of things. So this is a kind of a system where we're going to be approaching it from the level of the cause. That's why my book is called Be the Cause, because we're going to go down to the level of the cause. And the cause is always the blueprint. And the cause is multi-generational and multicultural in nature, meaning that childhood wounds do not just start with the parents' woundings of the child. They start all the way back. We could dial it back till the beginning of time. The wounds of your grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents, and this goes on and on and on. And then on top of that, layer on the cultural wounds, which are the rules and the norms and the ways children are reared in various cultures. And some of the cultural norms and rules are healthy, and some of them are not so healthy. And I treat a lot of people from different cultures, and my standard is that we have to put mental health first. So if it's mentally healthy, that's what we're looking for. A lot of cultures want culturally correct, and that may align with mental health, but it may not. So, looking at panel number one, the wounds of childhood, what shadows over us? Well, we're born from this particular mind map perspective. We're born with this light of potential. From a Maslow point of view, the self-actualization psychologist, the light represents our greatest, highest level of self. And if our basic needs are met, needs for food and shelter and emotional nutrients, as I like to call them, if we are flourishing in a family that supports us with unconditional love, then we will grow into the best possible versions of ourselves. It's called self-actualization from the point of view of Maslow. Now, if we are thwarted in our development, then these shadows compromise us, and then we do not manifest the best of our best. So let's look deeper into these compromises. And then we'll also talk about a topic that I speak on a lot, narcissistic abuse, and how that applies. So we've got different levels of childhood wounding, and of course, different different levels of that within the levels. So we've got physical abuse, and this could be as mild as just a spanking, or it could be as severe as a severe beating. So physical abuse is just one of those shadows that can compromise the psyche and leave us with some horrible self-esteem and horrible core beliefs, which we'll get into. The second type of wounding is pertains to verbal abuse. Now, this is more obvious, these negative core beliefs that we talk about, the low self-esteem. Now, the verbal abuse is more directly connected to that, because obviously if a child is called stupid or ugly or whatever, they will just internalize these messages, and because they're clear messages. Another level of abuse is sexual abuse. Now, sexual abuse can be as subtle as dirty glances and leering looks from a parent or grandparent or another family member or anybody else, all the way to some pretty severe cases of sexual abuse where so much trauma is caused that the child will resort to a defense mechanism called dissociation. So if you look at these levels of abuse and types of abuse, they obviously shadow over the fiber of the psyche of the emergent human being. If you look further, you'll look to see that there are other kinds of abuse, like control. Control is a form of abuse. If you are molding your child to be a little mini you, if you're molding your child to be in line with your philosophy because you want your child to be an extension of yourself, if you're molding your child to be your nurse or even your purse and lend you money, if you're controlling your child's choices in life down to what they want to major in college, or what kind of career path they should take, or interfering with their choice of belief, or interfering with their choice of anything, choice of the relationship, then you're looking at the wounds of control. And then there's another type of abuse, which is obvious, but sometimes not so obvious, the abuse of neglect. And this is a really serious type of abuse. It leaves no bruises. So when neglect is reported to Child Protective Services, for example, the agency that's supposed to protect the child, unless it's gross neglect in the form of not feeding your child, or not clothing your child, or not cleaning your child, this non-bruise type of neglect often goes unnoticed. And this is a severe form because it's actually 180 degrees opposite attachment theory. Attachment theory, I'm referring to Dr. John Bowlby, who talks about the need for eye contact and skin contact and unconditional love and a sense of engaging with your child, playing with your child, taking an interest in your child. And so these abuses and neglects are what shadow over us. And then to bring in the narcissistic abuse is the abuse of apathy. So the abuse of apathy is when you have a parent that really lacks the ability to feel, to care. And in this case, what happens is the system really spins around, um, excuse me, 180 degrees. And instead of the child being put number one, the child is really the last on the priority list, and the parents come first. And this is a horrendous message to send to children. And this is a call-in show, everyone. And the topic, to be clear, is healing the inner critic and the lack of self-esteem. So what is this inner critic and how does it get in there? So let's go back to panel number 1 and let's take a look at all of these abuses and neglects and see that the inner critic starts to form on a subconscious, on a non-verbal level, because words at the early stage of development have not been formed yet. So there's no cognition here. So what happens in this area of development is if there's not that mirroring going on, if there's not that soothing going on, if there's not that healthy holding environment, if the parents are arguing, if there's substance abuse in the family, if there's a lot of neglect, physical neglect or emotional neglect, then the child is starting to get the message already. It doesn't have to be in the form of words. Starting to get the message that they're not very important. Okay, let me know if there is a call coming in. Okay?
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah,
I do have a question, though.
Yeah, please.
Somebody wants to know, I know this is probably jumping ahead a little bit, but wants to know, after panel 9, what is next? What is there?
Oh, that's a beautiful question, and thank you. And it is the next phase of development called Mind Map Squared. And Mind Map Squared is when we've gotten the shadows out of the way and we can shift into really moving forward into the light. And so there's never a case, I'll say never because we're human, there's never a case where we're completely 100% healed and we don't trip up and we don't regress. I don't think that we've evolved that far as a human race. However, once all of these shadows are out of the way and people have a sense of being the cause, after panel 9, we go into a phase called Mind Map Squared, entering the light. And entering the light is now taking forward everything that you've learned from the mind map and applying it to life and flowing into the next step, whether it's your career, your relationship, your creative endeavors, and then just taking all that information and moving and manifesting. So after panel 9 is really a process of manifestation, because it can't just be a process in your head. If it's not manifesting in real time, then you're just living the dream in your head, but you're not really creating the dream. So it's really a flow of creation and manifestation. And thank you so much for that question. I don't talk about it enough, but you gave me an opportunity to do that. So thanks. Hope I answered that question. Any other questions from the chat room? And I do much prefer that you call in and that we talk one-on-one. It's just so much more interesting for me to talk to you. And so I'm going to flow through my mind map so that you could see what blocks us from manifestation. So how do these nasty core beliefs get into our head? So as you can see, these nonverbal messages start to formulate, and then the baby starts to react to these nonverbal messages. And in panel 2, you can see that panel 2 is a visual of something cracked and broken, and I call it the cracked lens of perception. So if you can put up panel 2 so people can refer to this visual. And is that a call in? No. Okay. So people can refer to this visual and they can see that the lens of perception cracks our way of seeing. So instead of seeing straight, instead of seeing clearly, we become distorted because we are no longer seeing the world through a clear lens, a clear, unfiltered lens of light. Now these shadows are thwarting our growth, they're thwarting our psychological development. And in this area, panel 2, the therapy becomes focused on trauma, complex PTSD, reactions to the wound that include somatization, and so on and so forth. And so these somatization types uh, of, of, of being laid down from the wound point of view then get into the body. So the mind and the body are interconnected. And these interconnections show up as headaches, backaches, neck aches, jaw aches, stomach aches, all kinds of aches. And so the baby, unable to express itself verbally, will then resort to manifesting their childhood wounds in the body. And so these messages of abuse and neglect and so on show up in so many ways. And now let's move to panel 3, because this is where all of this garbage lands. This is where these negative core beliefs, as I like to refer to them, get encoded. So the DNA is a metaphor for encoding. Okay, you could see that metaphorically, the blue strand is a representation of the father figure or the secondary caregiver, and the pink strand is a metaphor for the mother or primary caregiver. And these bonds are supposed to hold the family together. And if you look carefully at the bonds, you could see all the little people on the scale of life, the step ladder of life, and some of them are just sitting around, lying around, hanging around, and so on. It's a panel that represents an unsustainable system, a system gone wrong, where these bonds are not going to hold for long because they're not based on nutrients, psychological and physical nutrients. They won't sustain, and they don't hold together for long because they're not meant to hold together for long, because again, they're not healthy. And anything that is built on unsustainable foundation is a house of cards. And the house of cards, as you know, will collapse. So this negative core belief department, if you will, is where all of these encodings happen, all of the negative core beliefs occur. And now what we're doing is we're translating these messages into the cognition, and these translations sound, they sound pretty horrible, and sometimes people are shocked at what they believe in. And so what comes up in the treatment room are negative core beliefs, and I can list thousands of them, but I'll just list some of them. And some of them sound like, you're a loser, you're not good enough, you should if you shouldn't even be, you shouldn't have even been born. If you don't please me, then you're not going to be loved. You are fat, you're ugly, and this goes on and on and on. And then this is what I mean by the inner critic. So the inner critic is actually these horrendous negative core beliefs that get ingrained in there, and then like a broken record, they get repeated. And like a broken record, they don't just unravel from positive affirmations. They don't just unravel by cute little techniques like stop thought stopping. They just don't, because they're deep in there. And why are they deep in there? Because when we're babies, we are permeable membranes, meaning we soak everything in and we believe our parents and we take on the messages of our parents because we self-define through the eyes of our parents, and that means that we see ourselves through the eyes of our parents. And I know that there's somebody that's trying to call in because they're calling my phone, so hopefully they'll reach the number
We
at
do
the
have a call.
studio. Okay, awesome.
Let's go ahead.
Hi.
All right, 360, you're live on air.
Thank you for calling
Hello.
in. And who is this, please?
Dale from Washington, Dr. Judy.
Hi, how are you, Dale? Nice to hear from you.
Hi. I just wanted to, we've talked before, and I'm in my later 60s,
Yes.
and I didn't get all of this figured out until just 4 or 5 years ago. And
Okay.
it's kind of sad that you wake up after the majority of your life has been lived, but I had a covert narcissist father who we were taught to do well in school and to have this image as a family and to excel. But whenever we brought home the trophy or we brought home the A+ on the report card, we were told that, well, we were not that special and that we shouldn't get a big head about anything. And that so you learned that, and it wasn't from my mother. She was very much supportive, but it was the father. And looking to him as a young child as your kind of your hero, I quickly learned that it wasn't appropriate to pat yourself on the back or to get excited or happy about anything. And he made sure that whenever we had a special occasion, no matter what it was, at school or church or holidays or whatever, he would somehow, right in the middle of it, ruin the whole thing for everybody. And he was a covert narcissist, and he'd have that disapproval thing, or he'd all of a sudden have the headache, or something would be traumatic in his life, and all of a sudden everybody else's situation was totally, oh my God, we've got to somehow focus on him. And it was just a pattern that at that time you don't see it, but now as you understand this process that you've described and what goes on in these dysfunctional families, it doesn't have to be both parents, it can be just one. I can see it, and the sad part is that it steals your confidence out from underneath you. Now, as I said, we were successful, and there was no doubt that we got great grades. We excelled at whatever we did, including most everything. But throughout my life, there were opportunities where I would say, gee, what would my dad do in this situation? What would he think? Or if I did this, what would he say? And there were times when I asked his advice on business dealings, financial things, land acquisition, whatever it was. And he would frown, or he'd just keep a silent to it, or he'd say, oh, gee, I just don't want to get involved. I mean, no confidence at all. And I would sit there and think, gee, I must be doing something wrong. And then I would pull off, and I would let the thing go. And then I look back at all those situations, and had I followed through on my instincts, which were pretty good, it would have been a whole different life. But, it took me 60-some years to wake up and find out that you were in this dysfunctional family by no choice of your own, and that you fell victim to all of this. And what you do psychologically is you put these self-imposed limits on yourself. You put self-imposed guilt. You put self-imposed feelings of, gee, I'm not doing well enough, or I'm displeasing someone else who really doesn't care about you anyway.
Absolutely.
So this is what I woke up to, and when I finally figured that all out, and it freed me, well, unfortunately, he's already dead, but it took after his death for me to figure that out. But even after he was dead, he had control over me up until I figured out what this was and this dysfunctional family thing. And I'm thankful for the advancement of the discussion, and so that other people can finally say, gee, I'm going to remove the artificial boundaries I've placed on myself because someone else has placed them on me mentally, and I'm carrying this inside, and I don't need to. Just throw those chains away and get it out of your system. Spit out that poison, and understand that it isn't real. It's not real. None of that's inside. The pain is real. The anxiety, the depression, all of those.
All
it's
that
very
is
real
very
feeling.
real. Right.
Yeah.
So
but in reality, there's nobody there that can stop you from moving away from that and going on to a better life.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the aspect that, even as an adult, and even though you knew better, right, your brain knew that there's something wrong here, but it didn't matter because it was already too late. It already got in there. The psychovirus, that's why I like to call it the psychovirus. It penetrates in. And so here you are, an intelligent man, and you knew what he was going to do or say, and yet you still asked him, so Dad, what do you think of this and that? And it was the same old, the frown and the lack of caring and the diversion and again, that apathy thing. That's just so painful. And speaking of apathy, he was really stealing the show from you, because every time you excelled, he would tear it down and divert the attention to himself, just like in the form of a true system gone wrong. The narcissistic system, the narcissist steals the show. They've got to be the center of attention. And some people don't wake up.
I was in a Little League state championship game, and I was a cleanup batter, and while he would not come to the game, my mom and sisters went. And they were in the stands, and I got up to bat. Bases were loaded. I hit a grand slam home run, and if anybody knows baseball, that's a pretty big achievement. I came home, and I was just elated to tell him what I had done, and he said, baseball is a stupid game. They ought to just ban baseball. It's a waste of time, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There was nothing more said about that whole event, So there was a classic example of what the narcissist, he was jealous of, or I don't know. I know now that he was resentful of all of those achievements by anybody else. But this is the other poison that happens. Family. It was a large family. You then have siblings who then go along to get along and become the flying monkeys. And so even as you leave the home and you become an adult, and you find this throughout your whole life, wherever you go, Christmas event, when families get together, they get together for birthdays or Christmas, or, it's maybe once every 3 to 4 or 6 months, sometimes once a year.
Sure.
Those were terrible of times, because then as you then ever challenged the situation and said, this just doesn't make sense. Why am I putting myself through this? Your siblings would come down, and as flying monkeys, they would chastise and jump all over it. And you'd say, and there might be one sibling who's the quiet, the lost child, and I think she and I have gotten along quite well, and we've had some good talks and everything. But she had her confidence destroyed. She just retreated back to the back, furthest away bedroom, and lived her life, and was youngest and became the lost child. And I think by the challenging of it, you became the scapegoat, and then there was the golden child and the hero child and all that. But they, to this day, now in their late 60s, 70s, they don't want to talk about any of this stuff. They're very, very defending of the situation, the dysfunctional family.
And that is the tragedy, is that the system doesn't get exposed because the tie is with the parents, and not many people want to confront the cause. They don't want to, because we're almost programmed to preserve our parents, because the parents are survival mechanisms. And so we don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And again, most therapies don't want to touch the cause. Who wants to go through taking inventory on their parents? And as I say in my book, this is not a blame your parents, throw your parents under the bus kind of a process. However, it is a process of really taking a look and connecting the dots of childhood wounds all the way down to the core of who you are today and how you got poisoned, as you put it. And
And once you see all of that and you can piece it all together, your light's going to go off. You'll have the aha moment.
That is correct, Dale.
I tried talking to my siblings, and the reason they fight it, and because, and I had no reason to have to talk to them about it, because I understand that you cannot change people, and you shouldn't worry about it. If they want to be the way they are, don't feel guilty for that. That's what they're going to do. But I just wanted to free them up from all of the same, because I see the agony and things that they put themselves through that they're still experiencing. And the only reason to talk to them about it was to free them, or let them have the chance at freedom, psychological freedom. And the backlash is tremendous. And so I've just accepted that it's what it'll be for them. They're just going to have to suffer through, and I feel sad for them that they're going to go to their end days and not have that freedom of and peace of mind that comes with getting out of that psychological prison.
And you know, the flying monkeys are the chorus line, you know, those Greek plays where there's some sort of a tragedy going on, and then the chorus hums in and repeats the theme. It's almost like, I think of it like a Greek tragedy, the tragedy being, of course, all of these lies and misperceptions that the child ingrains into the fiber of the being, and then the flying monkeys come along and reinforce the system. And so this is, to me, even worse than the double dungeon of darkness. Now you brought in a third element. It's the triple dungeon of darkness. So you can't turn to your mother, you can't turn to your father, can't even turn to your siblings, because there's this whole system that's set up to hide the truth and to uphold something that is highly dangerous. And sometimes, and I've talked about this on several shows, these negative core beliefs are killers. These negative core beliefs lead to suicide of individuals. People who, even young children, I've had too many mothers talk about their sons or daughters attempting suicide or actually committing suicide. And these core beliefs, can you imagine the core beliefs of these children, these thoughts reverberating that they're losers and they shouldn't have even been born, and that they're you know, whatever's going on in that child's mind, if we don't dismantle that stuff, pure suicidal poison. And yes, there is a pathway out. And there's one significant line in my book that I'm sure glad I put in there, because it says something like, once you start identifying these negative core beliefs or lies, rather than identifying with them, then you can start the dismantling process. So the key is to identify them, not with them, because when we're children, we identify with them. Our parents are our gods. Our parents are the people that we look up to and believe. But that doesn't mean that they're telling truths, and that doesn't mean that they're building us up into human beings that are going to be able to sustain ourselves emotionally. So you did it. You were smart enough to identify it and catch the lies and then break out of the psychological prison. And then there's that other process where panel 4, 5, 6, where we've got to track the chaos, and then we've got to address the defense mechanisms, which there are many of. And then we've got to get that psychological poison out, so that it's not just being ingested into you and further poisoning you, nor is it being projected on other people, but it's actually processed and neutralized so that you can then shift out of all the mess.
You know, I wasn't smart enough to figure this out until, like I said, in my 60s, and when I started listening to the programs and your program, and I think and it was a very powerful thing you said one time, and I don't know if it was in the book, which I've read many times, or if it was on one of the shows. But you said, when we're all born as an innocent, clean slate as a baby, we have none of these core beliefs. We're a complete blank slate, and I look at it like a computer that hasn't had the files, the corrupt files put in it yet.
Right.
And if you have healthy parents and they give you support and love, and if you accomplish something, they encourage you to try even more and
Yes.
and support you on it, versus somebody who criticizes or neglects you or just physically, verbally abuses you.
Yes.
You as a child now, you're learning, you're getting correct, your beautiful, innocent, pure self that you were born with is now getting ingrained with all of these negative core beliefs. And that was something that I hadn't really thought of. And I thought, she's right. We all come out of the womb just perfect beings.
Yes.
We just need to be programmed. And it depends on who the programmer is.
Yes.
And if you've got a bad programmer, and that programmer is a narcissistic parent or two narcissistic parents, and maybe you've got siblings who are older and they're not good influences, you're going to have your internal core is just going to be polluted with crap that has nothing to do with the reality of what you are. You are a perfect being until those people came in and messed you up. So quit blaming yourself and go back to the idea that, gee, if I take all that crap and they put into me and throw it away because it's not real anyway, it's what they wanted to do to control me. And that's all they did. They want to control you, and they are weak, insecure individuals, and the only way they can make themselves feel good is to make someone else feel bad.
And that's the agenda right there, just what you said. What's in it for them? The worse you feel, they get brownie points. Every time you feel bad and your father diverts from your home run or your A+ or whatever, it's almost like when you are narcissistically wounded and you have that hole in the soul and someone comes off as better than you, more successful than you, then that's a direct threat. So what do? You want to chop it down. That's what you want to do.
Well, and then here's a classic example of him in our family. We would want to get involved in something. There might be an event at school or an event at church or something in the neighborhood. And he would do everything in his power to make sure that our family or we did not participate or that we did something else that day. Or he would isolate us so that we were always under his control and not influenced by outside parties if he had anything to say about it. And if we were influenced by outside parties and we came home and said, oh, gee, I just listened to the greatest speaker down in school today and I was so impressed with what he said, he would instantly tear that guy down and say how stupid it was and don't listen to that. And that was his control. He wanted to make sure that we always stayed in his control. But that's the fallacy of the whole thing. And I want to thank you again for all that you're doing to help people.
You're so welcome. And I always say this, it's so true. I love what I'm doing because it's always a challenge and I've always got to figure out, it's almost like, I like it so much because it's like psychological detective work for me. And let's figure out who done it, what happened, how it all got in there, how the computer got warped, how those viruses got in there, how to process them through, and then how to really morph out of the whole mess. So that's what happens.
Get them to revert back to the clean slate.
That's it. That is the paradigm shift. So if you look at panel number 7, you will see that panel 7 comes together and there's light in the center. So we're restored to the clean slate state. Through integrating ourselves, we're restored. And then that light in the center is a metaphor for the clear lens of perception. So now we're seeing and being differently. We're a new being. We're seeing clearly. It's the clear eye of perception. So thank you so much, Dale, for sharing what you experienced in your childhood and then what you discovered for yourself. And I just want to reiterate that most people don't wake up. They just, you said, oh my God, I was 60 and I just started waking up from this. Well, most people don't wake up. And that's the sad story of humanity is they keep going through 4, 5, 6, chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And that's where most of us live. So I think we can do better than that. And I really, really appreciate your insights and tracking your entire life and sharing it with everybody on the show tonight. So, and I know I'll hear from you again.
I want to encourage all the other listeners to don't give up, because the end result upon getting this clean slate back and getting your freedom back, it is such a life. It's overwhelmingly beautiful. It's a great experience, and it's not impossible. And I thought it was, but once I realized that it wasn't me and that it was always in my control to take my life back and maintain my boundaries and to protect myself from outside people who are trying to interfere with it. The power and the freedom feels so good. And I just want to encourage people, don't give up.
Thank you, Dale. Okay, I know we'll speak again. Appreciate it. Okay, and that's why I call the book Be the Cause, because Dale was the cause of the outcome of his life. And he's an example of how we can all be the cause. Because part one, it's not our fault. It's not all our fault who our parents are or were. It's not our fault what they programmed into us. It's not our fault that they got programmed with their psychovirus. And so you can see this is a multi-generational trickle down thing. And if you bust the system gone wrong, guess what happens? You now lay down a healthy blueprint for the next generation. And then that story stops. So that's how powerful this thing is. If there are no other callers, I'll go on a little bit more. Are there any other?
More call.
Oh, awesome. Okay, hi.
937, you're on with Dr. Judy.
Thank you. And what is your name, please?
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
It's Sanya.
I'm sorry?
It's Sanya.
Sanya, nice to hear your voice. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah. I figured things out at 49.
Awesome. Okay.
And that my mother was a narcissist, and it was kind of covert. Well, my sister sent me something, and I'm like, wow, that all clicked, and I started doing research, and I started setting some boundaries, and kind of got some independence from her, kind of, yeah. So recently I don't know, okay, I had lost 200 pounds, but over the pandemic, I regained it all as kind of I don't know if it was a protection thing, that she wouldn't ask me to be a caretaker because she's in that position right now. She's in a nursing home. And
I see.
And, yeah, and they're like, they want me to sell my condo and move in with her so that there would be a body in the house.
Okay, so let me just comment on that. First of all, I'm so sorry that you're in that position, and the pandemic has really done a number on us. And, you know, we resort to defense mechanisms. Some people use food, some people use alcohol, some people use gambling, you know, whatever it is. And now we're back in the isolation ward, more or less. Somewhat, sort of. I don't know where we're at. Actually, I guess we're receiving news all the time. But, you know, what you're talking about is parents that steal their children's lives, and then they put you at their service. So you become their caretaker. Excuse me, you become their maid, you become their little best friend, their confidant, their cook, their cleaner, whatever. And this is so sad. This is in line with narcissistic abuse, because what are parents supposed to do for their children? They're supposed to help them grow strong. They're supposed to help them become healthily dependent so that they can hatch out of the nest, so to speak, and fly and separate and individuate. The narcissistic parent is going to do the opposite. it's going to drag you back down into the system and make sure that you don't fly, okay? And that
I thought I escaped.
You thought you escaped? Okay, well,
I thought I escaped. You know what?
Okay.
I still escaped.
Okay, all right. Maybe you did escape. It's just that you have to be very careful that you're living life for yourself. And I'm not saying don't be compassionate with your parents and don't help them in time of need and in the aging process. I'm saying that don't do it at the great cost to yourself. So if you find that you're putting them
Yeah.
number one at the expense of yourself, physically, emotionally, financially, that's where you got to start putting up the boundaries.
I think she's in the best place. She requires 24-hour care, and she
Okay.
cannot walk one step.
Mm-hmm.
She's completely dependent. I'm not physically or mentally able to do it, but I think she's there. Now, my brother, I think he cooked that scheme up. So I've been calling him a golden monkey.
The golden monkey. Wow. Okay, that's a new one.
Golden child and flying monkey.
All it rolled up in one. The golden monkey. I like that. That reminds me again of the Wizard of Oz. The monkeys, and I think they had golden outfits on or something like that. All right. So
yeah, he's always been the golden child. Yeah.
Okay. Look.
So my wife.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had to fix something. I kept hitting buttons, so I had to fix the phone.
Okay, no worries.
Now, yeah, because I'm like all this, and I think my sister is like, Mom doesn't want it anywhere near her, and I'm not sure what that title is, the black sheep, and she keeps getting upset about it. I go, you dodged a bullet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's what I tell my sister, is she dodged a bullet.
Dodged a bullet. Okay, so why? Okay, so what part of you feels like you've escaped, and what part of you feels like you're still trapped in there?
The coercion of
You there?
I think we lost her.
Okay.
She sounded like she was having some phone issues, so.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll just talk a little bit to you. Hopefully you can hear me, and the audience can hopefully hear me really well tonight. And I'd love feedback on that, please, because a lot of you have been upset that the volume isn't okay. And we did something here, hopefully correctly, to fix that problem. So let me know if you can hear me clearly. Let's see, Sonia was talking about her mother. Now, I don't know much about her situation, but we've got to be very careful where we put our boundaries, because yes, we want to help. Yes, we want to be the good guys and make sure that we're being kind, decent human beings. It's just that when parents put in these negative core manipulative beliefs into our head, we've got to look at them and see if we're being hooked by them and then just dragged in by them. So maybe a core belief would sound something like, if you don't please me, if you don't help me, then you're worthless, or I won't love you unless. Okay, and if that's the consciousness behind the cry for help, you've got to be careful there, because it's like that psycho virus of, if you don't do XYZ, therefore I won't love you. And if you're toxically tied to your parents, which many of us are, and what I mean by toxically is that the tie, instead of a bond being a nourishing, supportive bond, it's a one-way street where that bond is almost like holding you captive to their needs and their agenda. So I want all of you to look carefully at the bonds that you form in your life, whether they be bonds with your significant others, your co-workers, your boss, your parents, and ask yourself if these bonds are healthy, if they create a sense of synergy. So if you look at panel number 7, paradigm shift, that is my model for synergy. And synergy simply means that you plus the other person are better off having known each other and interacted with each other, because it's the 1 + 1 is greater than two phenomenon, and there's the light. So one, you plus the other, whoever that may be, get together, and there's more light as a result of this getting together. And the opposite of that is something that I speak about quite a bit, and it's the vampiring effect, where you and another get together, and instead of there being light, somebody's feeling vampired, taken advantage of, drained, financially drained, emotionally drained. So these are the toxic bonds. The vampiring types of bonds are the toxic ones, and obviously the synergistic ones are the enhancing kinds of bonds. So back to healing. How do you heal through this? So step number 1, identify the wounds of childhood that get this entirely corrupt system, this computer psychovirus, whatever you want to call it, system loaded with horrible messages and horrible programming, and then track the reactions to this horrible system, this warped system, and how it laid down foundationally into the fiber of your psyche, these inner critic kind of voices, and then start dismantling the mess through identifying these core beliefs and sourcing them back to the lies, because they're lies and distortions, and then processing the psychological poison through therapy. And I'm just reminding you that you can avail yourself of a free consultation, and you can also avail yourself of a full consultation. And we do this mind map system, a pathway to healing, on a regular basis. And we have a beautiful team of people on staff that work with me, and we can match you with the right person, the right budget, and so on, so that you can take this journey. And then we also still have available the mind map system of healing, the 9-panel mind map system that I have created as a video, and that's still available for you to purchase, so that you can have that, and you can download that video and code in. Don't wait for it in the mail, because it's not a physical thing. It's something that you can download, and then you could take that journey to healing via the mind map video series. So that's available. And I would love to hear from you. If by any chance I missed you because you couldn't call in, just contact me at the clinic directly, and we could talk further. And remember that this kind of an encoding can be busted, okay? You don't have to live in this double dungeon of darkness or triple dungeon of darkness, and you don't have to live with these lies and misperceptions and misconceptions. And that's the point of the mind map, is to attain psychological freedom. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in, and for the callers. And I will see you next week. Good night, everyone.